This year's Grand Medal of the French Academy of Sciences was awarded to the pioneering climate scientist Professor Veerbhadran Ramanathan. Among his groundbreaking research includes the discovery of the greenhouse effect of chlorofluorocarbons, as well as the important role played by non-carbon dioxide gases such as methane in warming our planet. I spoke to Professor Ramanathan and started by asking how he felt on receiving this award.
Getting this medal, which is the highest medal of honor given to scientists by France, is a huge, huge honor for me. I'm deeply grateful to the French Academy for recognizing climate change science at this most difficult times when the science of climate change is being questioned. So it is just comes at a significant time for me.
10 years ago, you were in Paris at the historic COP21 summit as a science advisor to Pope Francis' Holy See delegation. A decade later, have we achieved the goals set in the landmark Paris Agreement?
I've been attending the COP function for at least 2 decades. But to be deputed to the COP21 at the historic city of Paris as Pope Francis's science advisor to his delegation, it was again a huge honor for me. And it also came at a significant moment when the entire body of scientists, we were unanimously calling for action. And as we know, that summit ended in the series of action items, policy statements, action items for climate change. One of the most significant part of that, which is still in my memory, is that we wanted to keep the warming well below 2 degrees. At the time, we understood that as 1.5 degree warming. And the resolutions passed were all what scientists were demanding. But unfortunately, we are nowhere close to achieving what we wanted to achieve in terms of cutting down the emissions. So let me just give you a few seconds background of what it is. Because of the carbon dioxide, which is one of the major heat-trapping gases, it's called greenhouse gas. Once you emit it stays for a century or long. So we started emitting this gas since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution around mid-1800s. Today, it had accumulated to 1,200 billion tons of carbon dioxide in the air. That's 1.2 trillion tons. Okay? So there's a huge weight of this blanket of CO2, and it has grown since the Paris resolution. So we have a lot of efforts we need to take.
Where do we stand currently in terms of the rising global temperature, considering that 2024 was the hottest year on record?
The planet 23 and 24 is already warmed up to close to 1.5 degrees. It comes at even for me, it was a surprise, because I, along with 2 other scientists, we were the first to predict 7 years ago in 2018 that the planet would cross 1.5 degrees by 2030. That's 5 years from now. At that time, United Nations and IPCC were saying that it will cross 1.5 degrees only 2045. Now, the United Nations, the World Meteorological Organization, all concluded we are going to agree with our prediction. We're going to cross 1.5 degrees. But we already crossed 1.5 degrees, 2023. So what does that mean? 1 year warming is not what we climate scientists would call climate warming. For it to be called climate warming, it rises to 1.5 and it has to stay there or even increase. So I would watch this. If it stays 1.5 and above for the next 5 to 10 years, then that's climate change caused by human actions. So the next 5 years is going to be truly momentous. If and when we cross that 1.5 degrees, I'm pretty confident we are going to by 2030. That is the climate which no human being or none of the species alive today has experienced in the last 200,000 years. So it's going to be a troublesome time.
What will be the consequences of crossing the two temperature thresholds, 1.5 degrees and 2 degrees Celsius?
I refer to when we cross the 1.5 degrees, that is what I call the Antarctic ozone hole moment, or you can call it the COVID moment. What's common between the two? The COVID pandemic, which started around 2020, moved into all of our living rooms. And what do I mean by that? We personally, or someone we know closely, was affected by COVID. Climate change, particularly the weather extremes, the heat waves which Paris has experienced in the summers, or forest burning, intense floods, all of us would experience it. Personally, or our own children, our own friends. So that's what I meant. Climate change would move into the living room of everyone alive on this planet. I am particularly worried about the 3 billion poorest people in the world. Villages in India, villages in Africa, I would say even villages in France, US, etc. They don't have the protection we have. The wealthy, we're all employed. So I'm worried about the poorest 3 billion, how they are going to survive that moment. You said what happens, we go from 1.5 to 2 degrees. I'm a bit more optimistic than you are. I am reasonably confident when we hit this 1.5, mind you, I'm just saying that's just 5 years from now, not 50 years, not 100 years, 5 years from now. In that next 5 to 10 year period, people would wake up, and our leaders at the city, mayors, governors, they will finally understand what scientists were saying and taking actions. I think that is why I called it the ozone hole moment. When that ozone hole appeared in the 1980s, the world woke up and passed Montreal Protocol and got rid of the pollutant. That is the moment in 2030 everyone would wake up. Certainly all of France. We will take the actions and what I call bend the curve. See, the warming is increasing, the emissions are increasing. You've got to bend that curve. I think we will take the actions by 2030 to bend the curve, but I'll come to that. Since the climate system is like a huge elephant or a huge battleship, you can't turn it around quick. It'll take about 20-30 years, even if we take drastic actions. So the curve would pass 2 degrees. And certainly, my own work suggests, and my predictions suggest, we will have more of these severe weather events. I call them low probability, high impact events. The probability is low, 5-10%, but when it strikes, the impact is huge. It's also called others by black swans or fat tails in the distribution. So there would be intense floods, droughts. I think it'll hit the farmers very hard, fires, and of course for urban residents, heat waves, heat stress.
What concrete measures can be taken to reverse this trend?
One thing I want to clearly convey to all of you, there are hundreds of solutions we can take. There's not one or two or three. These solutions can be taken at the individual level, all the way to heads of states. So let me list. First, we need to urgently bring the warming down. Not 50 years from now, 5-10 years from now. If you look at the pollutants which are trapping the planet's heat and heating it up, the first is carbon dioxide, but 40%, even 45% of the heating is caused by what we call super pollutants. They don't live in the air for long, just anywhere from few weeks to 10 years. We can quickly bring them down. There, first I list methane. Comes from natural gas. Methane comes from food waste when we throw it into the garbage. Second is hydrofluorocarbons. It's used as refrigerants. It's about 2,000 times more potent than carbon dioxide. Okay. Third is soot, black carbon. These are not gases. These are particles. When you see smoke coming out of your car, that is soot. Soot from a diesel vehicle is 2,000 times more potent. And then there is ozone. We have off the shelf, we can go buy it, things which will cut down their emissions. Okay, I'll give you an example for methane. Methane, one of the major sources of methane in the air is leaking from our gas pipes. So we are not asking for fossil fuel companies to eliminate natural gas. We are just telling them, don't let it leak. Tighten your pipes. The second major source of methane is the food we throw into landfill. There, organisms digest that food and release methane. Okay? And it is shocking. Every country in the world throws about 30 to 40% of the food into the garbage. Okay? There are about 3 billion poorest people who skip meals a day. So as a country and as a world, we should plan to not throw that food, preserve it and feed it to the poor. Okay? So there are a number of HFCs, hydrofluorocarbons, 2,000 times more potent than carbon dioxide. It's used as refrigerant. There are other gases which don't cause any climate change. These could be put into action if we start today within few years. That will cut the rate of warming by half in the next 10-15 years. So we could likely avoid hitting the 2 degrees. I want to caution you, if you left all of this to the individual level, it's not going to happen. We need regulations like the COP we had, but mandatory regulations, not voluntary. That was one of the things in the COP, it was voluntary. And methane cutting on the pipeline is just regulations we pass and have the fossil fuel companies implement it. Okay? The landfill, part regulations, part individual behavior. We avoid buying excess food or ordering too much at restaurants and throwing. Okay? So it's a combination of bottom up and top down. We need both.
Can you tell us about your discovery of the greenhouse effect of chlorofluorocarbons?
My discovery of the chlorofluorocarbons came at a sequence of accidental events. I call myself an accidental climate scientist. I didn't mean to be working in climate science. I got my engineering degree in India, and my job was, it was in a refrigeration company to prevent CFCs from escaping the sealed unit. And then I wanted to change my field. I went to research. I came to America. I came to America just for the good life, not for doing science or research, but I got accidentally. So I was working on the climate of Mars and Venus. I finished my doctoral degree. No one wanted to hire me. No one was interested in the climate of Mars and Venus. I'm talking about 1970s. So fortunately, NASA hired me to work on the ozone hole issue. And then the year I joined was when the famous paper, CFCs Destroying the Ozone, was published by two chemists who got the Nobel Prize. It struck a thing because I had worked with CFCs in India as an engineering. I got interested because I was well familiar with the quantum mechanics of these gases. And I just on evenings and nights, this was not my daytime job, started looking into the heat trapping effects of CFCs. I was shocked. It took me 2-3 months to keep repeating my calculations to make sure that I've not made any mistakes. And it turned out the CFCs per ton had the same warming effect as 10,000 tons of CO2. So it was called the super pollutant. And the two CFCs, there are many CFCs. It comes under the class of chemicals called halocarbons. So that's CFC11 and CFC12. They were used as refrigerants and spray cans. What propels the chemicals in most spray cans those days were CFCs.